Famous for 3 days. Famous for 3 days, Heidi Enderle.
It's the year 1970. She arrives at London Heathrow Airport wearing a very short miniskirt and very high-heel shoes, big glasses. The 2 customs officers, they look at each other and they say, "Oh, here comes another one. Countess Cheer, fellow Toastmasters." Another what, you might ask? Another au pair, of course. She took some leave of absence to explore and learn about the British culture. What better way than stay with the family in exchange for a little bit of housework? I mean, she's no domestic goddess, and she has no desire to ever be a domestic goddess, but how difficult can that be? A bit of housework. They'll never know. There's one thing that bothers her a little bit. Both her boyfriend and her boss were very happy to see her go. The family lived in Surrey, beautiful, sweeping driveway. The formal living area was filled with antiques. In stark contrast, the informal area was rather shabby and old. No sooner had she arrived, she was asked to bath the children. She forgot about the children. She never looked after children. She had no idea about children, and she didn't particularly like children. She tried to explain, "I'm an au pair, I'm not a nanny." So that was the beginning. The next day she had to start work at 6 o'clock, cleaning. At 9 o'clock was breakfast. At that stage she was nearly starved. And that's when she learned where her status was in the family. She wasn't part of the family. No, she was a servant. She was only allowed to eat when they all finished. But worse was to come. The lady of the house, did I tell you she was a medical doctor? She arrived with a basket filled with her most personal, intimate underwear and knickers. And she expected her to wash them by hand. "No way," she said, "no way. It's disgusting not to wash this. You try to argue when you don't speak the language properly." Well, you wouldn't believe the state they were in. You couldn't even sweep the floor with them. And so it got gradually worse. The next thing she announced that there was going to be a dinner party. She gave a long list of things to cook. Remember, she was no domestic goddess. She had no idea what these were, let alone how to cook them. So she knew she had to escape very quickly. So when the lady of the house went off golfing, she raced upstairs and packed her suitcase. All the way to the railway station. The kind old man looked at her. "You all right, lovey?" And he looked at her suitcase. The bits of her clothes were still hanging out of her suitcase. She was such a hurry. And would you believe she was still wearing her apron? She was running through Surrey with a suitcase like this and her apron. In London, she booked herself into an inexpensive hotel. But she was getting worried because it was filled with young women, barely dressed, loitering around in various poses. Could this be a brothel? She got so scared she locked herself into her room. The next day, she rang her boyfriend. "I'm coming home!" Huh, he laughed. I knew it wouldn't last. She rang her boss. He laughed too. He said, "Why do you think I gave you leave of absence? You're not designed to be a servant." But you know, when she went through Heathrow Airport, she was worried. She might get arrested. Because she remembered that she left the door open, the windows open, and she totally ruined the ladies' dinner party. All the vegetables were still lying around in the kitchen. But nothing happened. And the years went by, and one day she was in her office, having lunch, sharing a glass of Chardonnay or a glass of Merlot. In those days we could still drink at lunchtime. And the subject came up about au pair in England. She said, "I've been to England. 5 days I lasted." "Oh yeah. And where did you stay?" "In Surrey." "Oh. Were you the one that left the doors open and the windows and all the ladies in the party?" "Possibly." "Do you know what you did? You were the biggest scandal. You were the talk of the town. For 3 days, everybody talked about you. And you know what? You were the hero of all these au pairs. They all threatened to do exactly the same thing because nobody has ever dared to do that. Imagine. She was famous for 3 days and she didn't even know. I guess the moral of the story is, even if you do something irresponsible, it could still benefit somebody else.